like I'm not, I'm looking much better than I did yesterday. That's what. Let's get started. Today's topic, we're discussing depression, particularly self-harm. Like I said last week, that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation is that a lot of people tend to have a misunderstanding of what these things mean. So I'll go through a little bit of what I went through when I was younger when it comes to the self-harming. So let me show you guys firstly. I don't know if you'll be able to see the scars.
You can see.
Yeah, so a lot of people see them and then they're like, why would you try and kill yourself? And I was like, I wasn't trying to I wasn't trying to kill myself. So I think when it comes to self-harm, a lot of people misunderstand it or confuse it with suicide. And it's not that at all. It's literally how I would explain it is that what I went through, I was emotionally drained. You know, when you are so stressed and you feel like you can't handle your pain, your emotional pain, it gets so bad that you would rather experience the physical pain. So you cut yourself in order to release that emotional pain and rather feel the physical pain. So it's almost like that rush that the pain transfers from being emotional to physical, and then you're able to cope again. So basically that's what I went through when I just felt overwhelmed and I couldn't deal with my emotional pain. I would then just cut myself a few times and then release that emotion, transfer it to the physical, which for me, physical pain is like, it's better than the emotional pain. And that's what happened, you know? But since then, I've been seeing people. I saw a therapist. My mom took me to a therapist, and I started doing therapy, got much better, found ways of coping. But then fast forward to when I moved to Joburg, I think like maybe 8 years ago or something, I then started getting panic attacks. So again, I could not handle basically the pain and stress that I was feeling. And instead of dealing with those emotions, I closed them in, and in turn, my body went into shock, and I would literally get a panic attack where I couldn't breathe or I felt like I was dying. So the self-harming then moved to being anxiety attacks. And now I still see a therapist, but I'm doing much better. And I now recognize what those emotions are. When I start feeling overwhelmed from a very early stage, I just pick up the phone and I, call my therapist and book my appointment or speak to someone who's able to assist me. So I'm blabbering on now, and I'm also not seeing the comments that the guys are making here.
I'm
But
taking notes.
oh, I'm taking notes.
Mental notes. So I'm going to remember everything.
Okay, no, it's cool. So yeah, so that's my story, my journey with depression, with self-harm, and with basically my mental health. So you can elaborate on that or expand on that as a mental health professional to just let the guys know what it actually is and if I've covered everything.
I think you've covered most of the important factors as it relates to self-harm. That is what we call it in the profession. No? I guess your comment yeah, something about school, social workers, no medical aid. I read the comment. Next, I'm just going to ask, but I can't see the name. If that person can maybe just send me a message after this, then I'm going to talk to them offline or after the session. Because I see them, there's no medical aid and no school social workers. So I'll intervene further after the session.
Mm,
Okay.
mm,
But yeah,
okay.
like I said, we call it self-harm in the profession. And a
Yeah.
lot of people always think when a person self-harms that they're trying to commit suicide. It's totally different from suicide, like you said.
Yeah.
Usually happens a lot with people who are suffering from major depression, but there can also be other disorders. Like you said, when you had the relapse after 8 years, it was not necessarily because of depression, but it was more anxiety and not being able to cope with the situation that you were in at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can be caused or as a result of depression or other disorders like anxiety. It can also be maybe somebody with schizophrenia who would have auditory hallucinations. So this is somebody that hears something in their voices in their heads that says do
And
this.
so the
So
voice would be saying, "Do harm yourself,"
touch
or
yourself.
uh,
So when I, as a person, you don't necessarily feel that this is something that you need to do. You are merely reacting to these voices that you are hearing in your head.
mm,
And also the other thing is that it's not everyone that's got depression or another mental disorder that would self-harm, because there is people or there are people who self-harm without any clinical diagnosis. Because,
yeah,
as much
yeah,
as we are having these conversations about mental health, and it's important for us to have these conversations, we also need to take into consideration the usual or the common age group when this starts. It's usually adolescents
mm,
and
yeah,
young adults. And we know with adolescents how they can influence each other, and
yeah,
how, it's so important at that age to fit in and to
yeah.
belong, to do what their friends are
Pressure,
doing, even though
pressure.
it's wrong. So there
Yeah,
are people who self-harm because I was talking to Keke, and Keke shared with me at school that this is a thing that she does. So I'm also,
yeah,
because I'm just going to do it when I get home. But now the problem comes in where self-harm can also be addictive. So it has an
yes.
addiction element to it, because you sort of get used to how you feel after you cut, the release that you get,
The
the
relief,
fact that
and that's
now
exactly what I was talking about.
Mm.
Yeah,
The fact that now you don't focus on the emotional pain, like you said, but more
yeah,
on the physical pain. So I just wanted
yeah,
to clarify, because when we talk about self harm, people shouldn't always jump to the worst case scenario. Sometimes it's
mm,
just that with a child, for instance, the space that they find themselves in, the influence that they're getting from their
mm,
friends, the conversations that they're having, that could
yeah,
be the result. It could be that there's nothing deep to it. It's just you
yeah,
found yourself in this thing because Chomi said. It's sort of like
yeah,
when people start taking drugs. Nobody starts taking drugs because they want to have an addiction, but you try something out because my friend said they're doing this thing and makes them feel
mm,
good. So definitely it's not suicide. There's a number of reasons why people who suffer from depression would self-harm. The first one is
yeah,
the one that you got into, to say, when you're feeling so overwhelmed emotionally, there's
yeah,
just this sense of hopelessness and not knowing what to do with what I'm going through and how I feel. And
yeah,
emotions are easy to control. So when I start
yes,
cutting, I at least have a sense of control over the pain that I'm feeling, number one. And number two, it's something physical. I see it, and I can show
mm,
it to the next person even that, what, because I hurt myself here. But the minute that you start talking about emotions, you don't know how to put it into words, how to vocalize it, and you
yeah,
don't know how to even explain it to the next person, because a lot of times with what we feel, we also don't understand it ourselves. I don't know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, so it becomes very difficult for me to then explain it to the next person.
mhm,
And
absolutely.
the second reason why people would self harm, also people who are depressed, is a lot of times I get it. There's always two sides. Like we said last week, not everybody experiences depression in the same way. So
Yeah.
maybe for you would be this rush of emotions that you don't know what to do with. For another person, depression could just mean I don't feel anything. Like there's nothing. It's just blank. I am numb to pain. I
Mm.
am numb to any kind of stimulation. I don't want to wake up in the morning. I heard
Mm.
that my uncle died, but yeah, whatever. There's just
Mm.
no reaction in terms of your emotion. Then the person would start cutting because then it sort of gives them an opportunity to feel something. Because
Yeah.
unfortunately, with physical pain, as numb as you can be, the pain that you get from cutting, that you are going to feel. So it becomes sort of something that comforts them in the sense that, oh, I'm not dead because I can still feel certain things. So then I start cutting myself because I want to replace the fact that emotionally I'm just in this space where I feel I don't feel anything. And like I said, it can be addictive in nature. So this is also why it's difficult for people to stop. You know, uh,
Absolutely.
our our brains are amazing things, but they can also work to our advantage because if I do the same thing and I get results that sort of give me pleasure in that moment, in a way, I'm also
Mm.
teaching my brain to say, this is the thing that you need to do more of so that you can
Yeah.
continue to feel what you are feeling. So sometimes, or a lot of times, with people that self harm, it's not that they are not aware of what they're doing. It's not that they don't want to stop. It's not that they enjoy it, but also now the brain factor comes into play where this thing is almost like an addiction, and I'm doing it compulsively, meaning I'm doing it without even thinking. I'm doing it
Yeah.
even though I know it's harmful. I am doing it
Yeah.
even though family has spoken to me about this to say, what are you doing to yourself? And this is also the other thing. A lot of parents do not understand this. I think you were
Yes.
fortunate in the sense that when your mom found out, she immediately sought help for you. With other parents,
Yeah.
you thinking, I'm going to shout you in the right direction. So every time I see the scars, we are going to have this conversation where I'm not even listening to you. I'm not even trying to hear where
Mm.
you are coming from. I'm just going to shout, you wano siling, and you don't listen. You want attention. And what is this thing that you are doing? Are they bewitching you? Especially with our black parents.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that strategy does not work because you are going to scream your lungs out to this child. They're just going to turn around, go sit in a room somewhere, and now it's almost
And
like
continue.
you've given them a reason to continue doing what they're doing because I don't want to keep hearing mama's words or papa's words replaying in my head. So in order for me to, shift the focus from what just happened in the lounge when my parents were shouting at me, I just continue cutting myself because then I'm not thinking about them, but I'm focusing on this physical pain that I'm feeling. So I don't know if I
Yeah.
have cut everything, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So you know what I remember about being in that space? I remember the me not dwelling in that, like when I felt the emotion, it was almost like it's immediate. Let me do this quickly and get rid of it. Because I've got a life to live. I have to go meet up with my friends. I need to go to class. So it became like a default setting, like, okay, I've got issues emotionally. Let me tick that box quickly before I take a bath and go off to class or go meet up with my friends. So I agree with you in saying that it becomes almost like a go-to, a quick go-to. And for me, I hid it for a long time. I don't know if Joyce is on here. I think
I
the
saw
only
her
person
earlier.
yeah, I think the only person I would speak to is Joyce. Even in the middle of the night, if ever I experience anything and I do that, I would then give her a call. And she was there for me. And I think after a while, after speaking to her for a while, I realized that okay, this can't go on for long. But I still hid it. And then my sister saw my arm accidentally and she got annoyed and then showed my mom. when I wasn't prepared, showed my mom, and then my mom then made that decision to, get me some help. So chances are, had that not happened, I wouldn't have told any of my family members about it. I probably would have hid it for the longest time, wearing long sleeve tops, all these other things. So what I would say to people is, if you suspect somebody in your space or in your family or whatever is going through this, start giving them that safe space to have a conversation and to be able to express themselves to you. Because when you are going through something, you hide it very well. I know when, and people will say, oh, I didn't know so-and-so was depressed. Maybe let's say you are booked off work for a week and you come back and you let them know that, oh, I actually wasn't well. I was depressed. Oh, I didn't know you were depressed. You looked fine. People don't necessarily have to not look fine to be going through something. So how would you advise that we actually make sure that we are checking in with the people in our lives and making sure that they're okay and giving them a safe space to express themselves?
I think, firstly, I'm going to say, as a parent, you need to always be alert of what is happening with your child. And you mentioned the long sleeves, because this is usually how people who self-harm would hide their scars. Now, some would, for instance, cut, this area, I don't know what it's called, but behind the knees, né? Because what are the chances somebody's going to look there, So I think, as far as our children are concerned, we always need to be very aware of what is happening in your body, on your body. If I see something alarming or a scratch that was never there before that they cannot explain, then, I need to probe further in terms of finding out if there is something wrong. The other thing is also, to the parents, don't personalize your child not wanting to talk to you, like the lady that now asked about the niece who is cutting, she said in her comment or question that she said she doesn't know why she's doing it. It could be true, but the other possibility is also that she doesn't want to talk to them, and I think it's something that parents struggle with, because you feel, because I asked you as a mother or father, you are sort of forced to open up to me, and that's not the case. And in that instance, I would say encourage your child to speak to someone, a teacher, somebody that they trust, an aunt, or whatever the case may be, but don't make it an issue of, why don't you want to talk to me? Is it because I'm a bad mother? Or don't personalize it, because you only end up making it worse. And the same thing as far as friends or loved ones that we suspect could be going through this thing, the only thing from where you're standing as somebody wanting to support is just to make it known, Hore, I'm here for you. Like, if you want to talk, I'm here for you if you want me to go with you to, see a social worker or a psychologist or whatever the case may be. Like, you don't need to tell me how you are feeling. You don't need to explain to me. But if you just say you need me to hold your hand, give them that opportunity to say, it's not about explaining, because I think sometimes, it's so hard to accept that hand when people reach out, because you are thinking, I'm going to have to explain to Gege why I'm depressed, and Gege is not going to understand, because from where she's standing, I seem to have it together, So when we reach out,
the other thing that I've experienced is that sometimes you don't even know why you're depressed. Like, if someone had to ask me what is wrong, I can't tell you, because it's emotion upon emotion on top of emotion. So you actually need to speak to someone who will unpack it slowly, every week or every month, so that you eventually get to, oh, okay, now I can link the pieces. I understand why I was feeling like this. And you can also be able to pick up on your triggers, to realize that, oh, okay, this type of a situation triggers me and it sends me back to those emotions. And if you don't deal with those emotions, you'll fall right back into the same trap. So
What
I
you're
think a lot
saying,
of times we expect people to say, if you ask them what is wrong with you, to say, or it's not like you can say I'm hungry or I'm thirsty, or
mm,
you can say I'm sad, but why are you sad? I
why?
don't know.
Mm, mm.
Yeah,
And
so
what you're saying is very important because remember also with depression comes the irrational thoughts. Né? So your thoughts are not really structured
yeah,
the way that they should be. And this is why often when you speak to somebody who is going through depression, they will tell you, my life is a mess. But what
yes,
about your life is a mess, you know? And this is where the unpacking and the slow process would come in because as a friend,
mm,
when I speak to you, when you say my life is a mess, I want you to be specific and pinpoint exactly
mm,
where you
yes,
feel your life is a mess. And I'm gonna tell you, but KK, you're working, you have a job, you have this, you have that. What about your life? Kaba, is Kevin giving you issues? And when you say no, and then it goes back to the point of what do you have to be depressed about, you know? So in a
exactly.
professional setup, you at least have that um space to unpack it slowly so that you can also come, you know, and with the unpacking, it's also letting the person come to a point where they realize it's not as bad as I thought. Because when you
Yes,
say my life is a mess, you know, it fails to also acknowledge the parts in your life that are positive, the things in your
yeah,
life that are going good, because depression tends to do that to a person where it just clouds you of the joyful stuff and the little
yes,
things that you can celebrate, and now you only highlight and focus on the negatives and things that didn't work out, you know, which is
they
not
didn't work.
actually a true reflection of your life. So
And
yeah,
the
I think
other thing about this is the patience. I think people, we don't have the patience for healing.
mm,
And I think it's because there's been people that I've spoken to about this. You know, when somebody's going through a tough time and you're like, have you gone to see anybody? And they're like, yeah, I went to see a therapist, but I ended up being the one speaking. So I don't know why I'm paying this person if I'm gonna go there and be the one who's doing the talking. So, and then I'm like, yes, that's the whole point. You are going there
mm,
to speak. This person
mm,
is going to listen to you and
mm,
take into consideration the questions that they are asking you and
mm,
answer, and like,
mm, mm,
speak your heart out. And if after one session you feel like, how I wasted money, I went there and I paid someone to listen to me. Yes, pay someone to
mm,
listen to you, because most probably you are in that situation because you feel like nobody's hearing you. So
mm,
go there, pay someone to listen to you and speak.
mm.
And
And I think so.
after like 5 sessions, you'll understand this is why we were doing the talking,
Mm,
because people then start coming together, they're sitting there and they're making notes so that they're able to give you feedback to say,
mm,
these emotions, probably this is why you are feeling like this. Have you ever thought
mm,
about why you are
mm,
feeling like this? Yeah.
mm. Mm. I was going to say that even with the questions that's been asked, it's not just random questions because I'm trying to fill in the space. You know, there's a reason why we ask certain questions and we ask it in the way that we ask it because again, it's trying to get you to that point where you can sort of put into compartments what is happening in your head, you know, because if you just put it out there in terms of I'm not coping, but you know, try to put it into little silos that help you to manage the issue. And a lot of times people take that step of going to therapy because on my own, I could not, you know, get my issues into those compartments that make it able for me to manage what is happening. And I
Yeah.
also want to add that one of I don't know for other professionals, but one of the things that I also find frustrating in the professional setup is when people come for one session and they don't come back again. Ne? If you don't come back to me, it's okay because maybe you feel that me and you didn't gel because it happens,
Mhm.
you know, it's not a reflection of me as a professional. It doesn't mean that I'm inadequate in any way, but sometimes you just don't gel with the person and it's important in a therapeutic setup that you gel with your therapist so that you can be open
Yes.
and trust the person with your deep dark or whatever. But
Yes.
people would, for instance, like, you've been going through a situation for 10 years, and then you come for a session, one session for an hour, and you go home, you don't feel better. You're like, this is a waste of my time. It doesn't
Yes.
work like that. And again, this is where the patience for healing comes in, where people need to
Yes.
understand. You cannot expect that 10 years of trauma, suppressing, overlooking, masking is going to be resolved within an hour.
In an
It's unrealistic,
hour.
and people need to understand that you need to be gentle with yourself and understand that this is going to be hard. This is going to be a process. I always say also, if you upset with me when you leave the office, that's also okay, because there are certain times where you need to be upset, but in the long run, like you said, session 5 or 6 is going to make sense. Why did Tabby say that time? I didn't want to hear it and I didn't appreciate it, but now I see where she was going, because I
Yes.
think some people don't come back because they also don't like to be confronted. And the reason they don't want to be confronted is because they are not ready to confront whatever it is that is wrong.
Yeah.
So seeking help, a person also needs to sort of be prepared, for what is
Deal with your
coming.
demons.
Yeah,
Mm.
you must know that it's work, and I'm willing to do the work because I deserve better. I'm worth much more than I've been giving to myself, and I do want a better life for myself. And a better life does include being, mentally sound. It's not just
Mhm.
career, money, and all of these other things, but mentally also you need to be a whole person, and you
Yeah.
are the only
You need
person
to
that can
be.
give yourself that gift.
Yes. You essentially need to be ready to deal with the fact that you might also have toxic traits, you
Mm,
know, that are also adding to situations in your life that you not necessarily are ready to hear. I read somewhere during the week about toxic positivity or positivity toxicness or something like that. And I didn't even know something like that existed, where you are this person who, when something bad happens, you're like, oh, there's a silver lining, there's a reason for everything, you are almost like brushing away the fact that bad things are
mm,
happening and you need to deal with them. So you're not dealing with the bad emotions. You just think,
mm,
oh, you know what? Let me dust myself off. Everything
mm,
happens for a reason. Let's
mm,
move on, everyone. And then
mm,
after a few years, that stuff, it bulks up, and then it comes all in one go, and it's
mm,
it's it's not a good side. So you need to be present and deal with the emotions as they come. When something bad happens, take it as, geez, that sucks. Wow. Okay, that
mm,
sucks. I don't like it. I'm in a bad mood. I'm gonna go take a nap and deal with it then. And
mm,
instead of trying to cover it into this lovely candy that
mm.
everyone can take a munch of, because life is so amazing, guys.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
yeah.
And it
So
can't be, because that's not realistic. And I think partly also what we see in society, what we see in terms of the people that we look up to, your celebrities, people that we follow online, and sometimes we hear, hard things that happen to these people, and then next thing, when are you still digesting the fact that, hey, Khuti, the husband was a crook and all of this? Next thing, Mutu is coming onto the screen, video, living their best life. And I understand that it's not a true reflection, because it's not to say that when this person is alone, they are not grieving
dealing.
the loss, or they are not dealing with it. But I mean, people make the mistake of basing their entire lives on 30 seconds that they saw, yeah, somebody's video on Instagram, and they need to understand. And then we end up putting this unnecessary pressure on ourselves, because you feel like, hey, but Keke, when she went through whatever, she didn't have a meltdown. But you don't know, you don't live with Keke, you are
Exactly.
not with Keke 24/7. So people end up putting unnecessary pressure on themselves because they want to sort of live up to a standard that doesn't exist. I always say that if you going to look on social media and you are looking at people and you are feeling this is the life I want, then you are basing your goals, your aspirations on something that doesn't exist. Because a photo of me, I could take a photo now looking fly and then put the phone away and then cry myself to sleep because you don't know what I was feeling when I was taking that picture. It's like what you said last week.
And we don't know the scars you are hiding.
So people need to understand it's okay not to be okay. It's okay for you to take a moment. It's okay for you to just say, you know what, I need time out because this is a lot. I'm hurt. It's the same also with breakups. You know how we just you don't want to show people you are hurting. So he's busy posting pictures. Life goes on. Luena, you want to compete with that, but that is not necessarily how you feel. So I think people at the end of the day need to understand that me being a positive person does not necessarily mean that I don't acknowledge when things don't go my way or when I lose in certain ways. And there's a scripture. I give you scripture, man. Like I'm not that Bible fanatic, ne? But the scripture, I think it's John 11 that says Jesus wept, and it's the shortest scripture or verse. Yeah, it's the shortest verse in the Bible. So normally, especially when I'm dealing with a Christian client, I would always say, you know what that means for me. That's my interpretation. I didn't do theology or whatever, but this is how I interpret that verse. I read Jesus wept, 2 words, shortest verse in the Bible, but it says to me, as much as Jesus was this powerful, mighty figure during those times, something happened in his life that caused him to pause and weep. He didn't weep for the whole year, yes, but that then says to me, if you are a believer of God, and I'm saying this because sometimes as Christians, we place also that pressure on ourselves to say, I can't afford to show people I'm hurt that I lost my job because I'm supposed to be the one that's saying God will provide. No, it's okay for you to take that weepy moment to say, you know what, this sucks, this hurts. I wasn't expecting this. What am I going to do with my life? Yes, you're going to pick yourself up. You're going to try again. You're going to go on. But don't deny yourself that moment to say, today, in this hour, right now, I am not in the best space. And I don't want to be in the best space, because that's also another thing that we need to acknowledge. Just because Keke called me and she wanted to make me laugh, I shouldn't be forced to. Now I must pretend. If I'm not okay, I'm not okay. And give yourself that platform to say, I know, not today. And
I actually wanted to now ask, when you're talking about giving yourself a moment, we have a question from last week. Z commented on last week's video about the link between self-worth and mental health. That sometimes we put our entire worth into one or two aspects of our lives. And lockdown has confined us to define ourselves in much more restrictive ways, and that can erode our self-worth. How do we keep a new balance? And I guess in simpler terms, it probably like if you are maybe a runner, for example, and you would say running is my life. How do you then find a new purpose under lockdown, or find yourself, feeling positive when something that you felt like was your life, you are not able to do anymore? Would you say it's healthy to define yourself by 2 or 3 things, or maybe 1 or 2 things that can be taken away? How do you actually define yourself without, maybe something that's necessarily not tangible?
It's difficult because if you think about it, last week when we did the first episode, we started by introducing ourselves, and then you say, I'm Rita Bile, social worker by profession, I'm a mother, I'm a this, but all of these things, in actual fact, if you think about it, they're not who I am. They are roles that I occupy. I occupy the role of being a social worker. I occupy the role of being a mother. But who am I as Ritabile if you take away those roles? And I'm saying this rhetorically so because I don't even have an answer for that, because it's something that we don't really take the time to get to know,
Think about
we don't think about it. And you never think, for instance, who am I if I'm not a mother? Who am I outside of being a mother? Because it's almost like you think you are being selfish as a mother because bana ba teng and there's nothing that you can do about it. So you sort of feel like now your life has to revolve around this thing. And I think if I understand the question, it's more about the fact that if me being a social worker and occupying that title and being in that role is all that I live for. Not that I'm not a friend or a mother, but it's like the most important thing in my life. I'm obviously going to take a knock when, because of the pandemic, I can no longer operate or function within that role. So I think as hard as it is, it's also maybe a time of reflection, of asking yourself, who am I outside of these things that have sort of validated my self-worth as a person? If I'm not doing what I used to do, what I love doing, what else is there that can sort of keep me going, And I think also trying to set new goals for yourself. And when I say goals, again, I want to stress, I'm not saying go write a book, go start a YouTube channel, because, if I've just lost my role as a social worker, which is something I'm passionate about, really, I am not in the mood to be writing a book, but try and find small things within your life that you can do as goals that you can set for yourself, that at the end of the day, when you achieve these things, are also going to show you, oh, okay, but there's still something to celebrate. So on the one hand, I've lost this thing that I was linking to myself with, but I'm also rediscovering myself sort of, because now I'm learning that, hey, you know what, I didn't know that I'm actually such a great cook or whatever the case may be. And I think also the other thing I wanted to say, like, create a schedule for yourself. You're not going to work yet, but don't allow yourself to sort of just drift through the day.
Absolutely.
And not really have a plan. Because now, remember, feeling productive or being productive is part of what mental well-being is about. When you are a productive somebody working fully functional. Now, when that is taken away, it can obviously make you take a knock in terms of your mental health, but try to stick to a schedule in terms of, yes, I might not be going to work, but I'm still going to wake up at 6 and then maybe exercise, or I don't know, repack my wardrobe or whatever, but don't try not to just exist, because part of not doing anything, I think, also then negatively contributes to that feeling of, like, my worth. What am I doing with my life? I wake up every day, I watch TV, I eat, I go to the fridge, I come back to the TV, I go back. You see how I'm also not actively doing anything to sort of counter what has happened, because the pandemic is not something we can change. Some of the situations that we're encountering with our employment and our jobs and the security that came with that, it's not something within our control. But try and find those little things in your life where you still have a sense of control, and try to also, not in that way you are brushing things aside, but what is there that's positive in this situation? Is it the fact that I'm home and I can spend more time with my children, because I always come home late and there was never really time to ask them about their friends and what they were doing at school and all of these things? Is it that I can spend with myself finally without the pressure of deadlines and all of these things? Because a time is going to come where we start rebuilding, where we start actively looking for another job if you lost your job, maybe. But now just try to find those small things that keep you going. And I think what's important
is also good. sometimes you don't have time to sit there and like just jot down your emotions, but one-liners can do wonders. Like sometimes I just page open my diary and I'll just write maybe, today sucked. And then I leave it like that.
Mm.
And then I leave it like that. I go on about my life. And then tomorrow something great will happen or not. And I can go back and say, ooh, today I ate the most awesome cookie that I've ever tasted. And that was so cool. And it
Mm.
could be the simplest thing. And sometimes I go back and I page through and read those, those lame sentences, and I
Mm.
just laugh like, oh, you know. So the other question I wanted to quickly ask you, I think we're out of time, but I wanted to ask you about self-harming as an adult. Because obviously when I started self-harming, I was like probably like in my late teens, 18, 19-ish. And that probably went on for about 2 years, but obviously with help, things got better. But is this something that can happen at an earlier stage or at a later stage in life? Do you find maybe a 37-year-old person who then starts to self-harm in a way?
It can because there's really no um I said that it's common amongst adolescents and young adults, but it doesn't
Yeah.
remove the other age groups from the picture.
Yeah.
So you can,
Okay.
depending, because remember, one of the things that could also sort of trigger this thing would be a traumatic event, for instance.
Okay.
So I could have a fairly normal childhood and then into my 30s experience something very traumatic that I'm not able to handle and I don't know how to cope with the situation. And it could be
What
at that
is a
age that I
traumatic
start.
event? What would be considered a traumatic event, or does it just depend on your life, basically? Is there examples of a traumatic event or
I think I'm gonna say that it depends on a person, and I think it also depends on the circumstances around a certain situation, but it's usually when something happens that you feel is out of your control, and where every resource that you have, whether external or internal, in terms of how do you cope with stresses and things
mm,
that maybe cause you stress, this is the one thing that you feel, I don't know how to deal with this. So loss, traumatic event, for instance, for someone can be the loss of a loved one. And then you can
yeah,
find there's other people that go through loss, they lose a loved one, but then life still goes on. Traumatic event for somebody could be maybe being sexually assaulted. And then for
mm,
somebody else, it could just be like, okay, this thing happened, yes, I was hurt, I was in shock or whatever, but then I'm able to sort of pick up the pieces. So there's a lot of factors that would go into play with regards to me as a person, my personality traits, how resilient am I as a person.
okay,
Also
yes.
previous exposure to certain things, because like if you take a child that grows up a Kodishenty, and I'm not saying this with any disrespect to anyone.
Oh, okay. We're losing Rita there. Are you back? Oh, we lost you. We lost you for a moment. Okay, cool.
I'm saying a child, for instance, that's going to grow up in a home that's characterized by violence. Né? If I
Yeah.
think back to the time I was still working in Cape Town, I was in one of those neighborhoods where, like, just during the day, randomly you would hear gunshots going off.
Yeah.
Né?
Yeah.
And sometimes I would talk to these young children that would come to seek for help. And then you ask them, like, but aren't you scared walking in the street because there was a shootout like an hour ago? Then they tell you, no, we are used to it. Like
Yeah.
it becomes a way of life, sort of to the point where they are numb to this thing. But to
Okay.
me, somebody who has not had this growing up, it was
It's
traumatic.
traumatic. For you.
Yeah, just hearing the gunshot was traumatic because
And
it's not something that I'm used to.
touching on the children's side of things, I feel like as a parent um, who has had depression and going through all of these things, anxiety and all of that, I'm more now worried about my kids falling into the same trap, or feeling like I need to protect them more, overprotectiveness or whatever. Maybe next week we can have a chat about depression, maybe dealing with kids, or as a parent, how ways in which you can try and help your kid through depression, or try and make sure that you put out the necessary tools out there for them to be able to seek help, even though that help might not be from you, maybe contacting somebody else. How do you do that? So let's maybe have a chat about depression and kids next week.
Okay, no problem. And I think also maybe just in closing, also preparing them, because remember, if I've suffered from depression, there is also a likelihood that my child
Absolutely.
could, go through the same when they're older. So how do you prepare your child then for, not without scaring them, but how do you prepare them that this is a possibility for you, because it's something that I've gone through, but we'll go into it next week, like you
Next
said.
week. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Very nice. I'm so sad now. I can't even see the question here, but it's fine. I think I'll ask whoever maybe has questions. Please, guys, DM us. Hey, this is you.
She says I'm a show of face.
Yeah, guys, if you've got any questions, please just send them to me, and then we'll touch on them again next week. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.